Oh, we've got Debbie in a while. Hello, everyone. Good evening from London. My name is David. I'm delighted to know I'm alcoholic. As we were just talking about earlier, if I didn't know I was alcoholic, Patrick, I'd be drinking, wondering why I keep getting drunk. So it's good to know, isn't it? So you're all very welcome to this, what we have tonight. We've got a Jim Worley presentation. Jim is with us tonight. Jim Worley from Cancun, a good friend in Cancun. He's going to do a presentation on Tom Powers. I'm looking forward to learning more about this gentleman. I believe he was involved in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions and the second edition of the Big Book of AA, and also Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll just say the one on the right first, the set aside prayer. We'll do that one first if you'd like to unmute, if you're interacting with the thing. So God, please
help me to set
aside everything I think I know with an open mind for a new understanding. Amen.
And our free thinking friends, the serenity statement they say, that should be may I seek. So I guess, may I seek, if you'd like to join in, may I seek the serenity.
May I seek serenity to
accept things inside cannot
courage to change things I can, willingness to know the difference.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. And we're just going to have a few moments silence to gather our thoughts and think of the alcoholics who've yet to find the solution. And we're also thinking, of course, of family members. So thank you, appreciate it. Let's try and grow in understanding and effectiveness. Well, we got Jim Worley with us. Tom Powers, Life with Bill Wilson, LSD, Women, Spiritualism, and from AA books to AAA. Jim Worley.
All right. Thank you very much, David. And, let me get started here. And we're going to go here. There we go. Tom Powers and friend. And his friend is our friend, Bill W. And hard to find a lot on Tom Powers. There haven't been any books written on him. He's scattered through a lot of AA history. So I gathered together what I could find on him. And we're going to see if we can find out a little bit more about who Tom Powers was and what he played, part he played in AA. So Tom Powers and his friend, Bill W. There was Tom, Bill, and LSD, and then there was Tom, Bill, and women, Tom, Bill, and spiritism, Tom, Bill, and writing, and Tom going from AA to AAA. Now, as I mentioned, at least in the United States, AAA means the Automobile Association of America. And, the guy, this is the guy that calls up and he says, my name's John and I'm an alcoholic. And the person says, well, this is AAA. And he says, yeah, but I want to explain to you why my car's in the lake. And, so that's one of the reasons why sometimes our cars get into the lake. And we can tell that to AAA. But in this case, AAA means All Addicts Anonymous. Thomas Edward Powers, the son of Thomas Francis and Catherine Votruba Powers, was born June 7th, 1911 in Chadron, Nebraska. So right in the middle of all the activity, I'm sure. Met Bill W. in August 1941 at a meeting in Greenwich, Connecticut. Attended his first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in White Plains, New York in October 1941. Date of sobriety, alcohol and drugs, October 10th, 1946. Tom, a lifelong friend, described the first time he heard Bill speak. The year was 1941 in Greenwich, Connecticut. Tom says, he was talking about himself. He was telling the bedtime story, the story of his hot flash, a variety of it. I don't remember the details. I was real screwed up mentally, but my instincts were all right, and he really galvanized me. He was authentic and he was sincere. But there are sincere fools in the world. The field is crowded. This guy was right on balance on the spiritual stuff. He was the first crack in my armor. Authenticity was a big part of it. I saw he was sane and was for real. Tom wrote this. He said, on Wednesday morning in October 1941, there were some 30 men and women assembled in a small room in the East Tower of the County Center building in White Plains, New York. As I entered the room, it was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea of the magnitude of the change I was exposing myself to. That first meeting, I was both receptive and unreceptive. It is certainly possible to be both simultaneously, and most newcomers are both. I was receptive because I needed and wanted help. I was a bad drinker, just out of my second trip to the mental institution that he called the Bug House in months. But the smell of Metrazole, used to induce convulsions and shock treatments, was still fresh in my nose, and with the realization clear in my mind that compulsive alcoholic drinking was the cause of my troubles. I wanted to stop drinking, and I'd been told that the people in this room knew how to do that. And as the meeting progressed, I found myself believing readily enough that indeed they did know how to do that. I had repeatedly tried and repeatedly failed not to say no to that first drink. So I listened to what they said, and I took it seriously. There are two great living realities in Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship and the program. Again, this is Tom talking. Comparing these two is like comparing your right and left legs. Both are necessary if you're to climb steadily and maintain your balance on the road to recovery. It was the fellowship that loomed largest for me at first, so large that I let the program take a dangerously neglected second place. I liked the meetings from the start. I liked the people and the talking and the helping of others from the earliest days. 12-step work was big for me, and from this activity, the strength and truth of the movement flowed into me. I got sober and stayed sober, and my life began to change in striking ways. My job began to go well. My home life greatly and beautifully improved. I began to experience joy in ordinary things which I had not known since childhood. After some months of sobriety, I began to drink again. And in spite of strenuous work in the fellowship, frequent attendance at meetings, and a lot of activity in trying to help others, I was unable to regain my sobriety. Over a period of years, the drinking continued, and although I believed in the fellowship and worked hard in it all the time, it was ineffective for me. Ineffective at the level of maintaining sobriety. It was ineffective in giving me enough hope and enough sanity to keep trying, to keep coming to meetings, and to keep in touch with my AA friends. This is from an article he wrote called The Program is a Life Jacket, and you can Google it. Tom Powers, The Program is a Life Jacket, or a little bit more. We don't have time to read all of it. And he goes on at the end to say, and then one day I saw that my trouble was lying in a hospital bed. By the way, it was at Towns Hospital, in a drying out place the week after Easter in 1946. I saw something to which I'd been blind before. I saw the importance of the program. I saw that I'd been trying to substitute the fellowship for the program, and that you simply can't do that and get away with it. Again, it is like trying to substitute one of your legs for the other. You can't walk that way. That's where Tom ends. So with Bill Wilson as a sponsor, Tom became sober in October 1946. He says, for the first time in all my years in AA, I took the card in my hand and read the 12 steps carefully, slowly, trying to understand what they were saying. I began to do this every day. I also read the big book, studying it as what it is, a textbook on the application of the steps. So we'll talk a little bit now about spiritism, seances, Ouija boards, channeling, and things that go bump in the night. Start with a quote from Lois, the book about Lois, When Love Is Not Enough. Bill and Lois came to hold frequent Saturday evening spook sessions at Stepping Stones, joined by such friends as Ann and DeVoe, Ruth and Wilbur, Tom P. and Adelaide, and Dr. Bob and Annie when they were in town. They would conduct various psychic experiments, often involving a Ouija board, in a downstairs bedroom that was quickly dubbed by Ann Bingham as the spook room. Because soon after Bill sobered up, he came to think of himself as having some psychic ability, and believed he was capable of picking up energy from others, even those who had passed from this life. His belief in clairvoyance and other extrasensory manifestations came from his deeply held conviction following his spiritual experience that life after life is a matter of fact as well as faith. This led to his attempts to get in touch with other lives in other times. Both he and Lois had discovered early on that Dr. Bob and Annie Smith also had great interest in the field of extrasensory phenomena. Bill, recounting the purported psychic abilities of his sister Dorothy Strong, Wilson writes that his sister had begun channeling messages from Camille Flammarion, a deceased astronomer and spiritualist. These communiques from the grave, Wilson writes, even contain references to Gerald Heard. Bill had met Gerald Heard on the right there with Aldous Huxley, had met Gerald Heard and Aldous Huxley in the early 40s. There are several references to Wilson-Huxley meetings in the Wilson-Heard correspondence. Quote, "If you see Aldous Huxley, take him my renewed thanks for those engaging hours we spent together," Wilson writes in an October 13, 1950 letter to Heard. Heard responded to the letter within days of receiving it. Heard begins his reply to Wilson by suggesting that he and Aldous Huxley get together with Tom Powers, a close Wilson associate, for another seance. This foursome, Heard writes to Wilson, might uncover still another chapter of your pioneering and explore, both for the insane and the so-called sane, the border country of psychical research of which you know so much. On one of their spooking experiences, Tom P. told this story. "We went over to my aunt and uncle's one night, and Lois and Bill went along and a couple of other people. Someone said, 'Have you got a table?' So they hauled this table in, and she said, 'Oh, this table's been sitting in the sunlight, and it's all faded out, and I've been intending to have it refinished, and never did.'" Remember that. So we sit down, and we're knocking the table around, and I don't know if it levitated or not, but the table would begin to spell out messages. It would raise and tap, and 1 tap for A, and 2 taps for B, and 3 taps for C, and the table was used primarily to astound by levitating, and we sat around and turned the lights out and put our hands down and wrapped around the table. The next day, Marion called up and said, "A very strange thing has happened. We went to bed last night, and when we got up this morning, we found the table was refinished. The whole color is restored, and the finish is perfect." So we all went back to see the refinished table and had to take her word that she didn't do it. Tom and his wife, Ginny, were regular members of the spooking circle. This is Tom's story of how he became involved with them. Tom says, "I was a problem to these people because I was an atheist, and an atheist is, by definition, a materialist. I mean, you can't be an atheist unless you're a materialist, and materialist is, by definition, someone who does not believe in other worlds." Now, these people, Bill and Bob, believed vigorously and aggressively. They were working away at spiritualism, and it was not just a hobby. And it related to AA, because the big problem in AA is that for a materialist, it's hard to buy the program. He said, "I had a hell of a time getting on the program. Couldn't get it through my head that there was any God, because God was a supernatural being." According to Tom, Bill never did anything, was not in some way connected with AA. One of the members of the Chappaqua AA group, Tom P., remembers that he and a group of fellow recovering alcoholics got so upset about Bill's spooking that they decided to do something about it. To the men who counted themselves his followers, many of Bill's activities came to seem ones unbecoming to a great leader. Since Bill Wilson never wanted to be a leader, he was not inclined to listen. The Chappaqua group, which met in the small, wealthy town of Chappaqua near Bedford Hills and had become the self-appointed guardian of local AA powers, was joined by another recovering alcoholic named Sumner Campbell. Remember that name? And a few of the men who worked with Bill. Another one of the men, Tony Guggenheim, wrote to a man they all respected, C.S. Lewis, at Cambridge, England, to describe Bill's and Lois's activities and to ask what he, Lewis, thought of them. Tom P. remembers that Lewis wrote back with total disapproval. "This is necromancy," he wrote. "Have nothing to do with it." Apparently, Bill's colleagues thought that a statement from a man like C.S. Lewis would influence Bill to change his private beliefs. Apparently, they did not know Bill very well. So Tom Powers and AA literature. This is a quote from Bill Wilson on the introduction of the second edition of the Big Book. He says, I hope you're going to like this new book, and if you do like it, you can credit Tom with 50% of your liking, because he's the guy who most painstakingly edited it, and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions before that, and also AA Comes of Age later on. Because between 1951 and 1957, he was actually hired in like 1948. He was the editor of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions with Bill, the main editor of the second edition of the Big Book, an important contribution to Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. A couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about Dr. Silkworth, we talked about the article in the Grapevine, the memorial article, The Little Doctor Who Loved Drunks, who was in the Grapevine in May 51, in homage to Dr. Silkworth. I don't know if you remember, but Bill said, that was such a good article, I wish I had written it. Well, guess who wrote it? Tom Powers. After the traditions were adopted by AA, a book on both the steps and traditions was in demand, and Bill undertook to write it at Stepping Stones, his recently finished studio. Wit's End, he called it, provided the seclusion he needed. Tom P., this is from Lois Remembers, Tom P., our devoted AA neighbor, helped with the editing. The book 12 Steps and 12 Traditions was first published as a series in the AA Grapevine during 52 and 53. Actually, it was just the traditions, not the whole book. It may have been easier for Bill to be publicly hard on himself for being depressed than it was for him to acknowledge something that he saw as a major reason for his depressions. According to Tom P., when he was working with Bill on the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, Bill was frequently overwhelmed by the guilt and remorse he felt as a consequence of his infidelities and the turmoil his affairs were causing within the fellowship. Tom said he would frequently tell Bill, you need to change your behavior. According to Tom, trying to write about the need for alcoholics to practice rigorous honesty, take searching and fearless moral inventories, admit faults, make amends to those they had harmed, and become ready to have God remove character defects, left Bill feeling terribly fraudulent. The result was those days others have also described when he was so despondent he literally could not pick his head up from his desk. Quote, all the while we were working on the 12 and 12, Tom said, I would argue with him about this. Bill, I told him you're killing yourself, and think about what you're doing to Lois. A writer and communicator, if a social movement is to survive, I've read, this was Mel B. talking, it needs a reliable body of writers. By that standard, Bill Wilson served AA well. In fact, it was his ability as a writer and communicator that helped AA become a worldwide fellowship and also steered it through some perilous stages in the beginning. Mel B. talking, he said, I discussed this once over the telephone with Tom P., a former advertising writer who had assisted Bill in writing 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Tom acknowledged that he had helped improve Bill's work on this book, but he had also done it sparingly. He recognized that Bill had a special quality as a communicator that needed to be retained. We had the quote from Bill at Founders Day when he introduced the second edition of the Big Book, saying, I hope you like this new book. You can give Tom 50% for your liking. Well, from both Brad P. and the AA History Lovers site, there's this letter that was found in the file cabinet belonging to Tom Powers. And it's addressed to Harper and Brothers, and it's from Bill Wilson. And it says, attention, Mr. Eugene Exman, religious writer.
Healthcare for minor form for the...
And this is Bill Wilson. You'll remember that Harper Brothers had a contract to print both the 12 and 12 and AA Comes of Age. So Bill's writing this letter to Eugene Exman, and he says, referring to the coming publication by you of AA Comes of Age, of which I am the author, I wish to make the following disposition of my royalty of 15% for the duration of the first copyright or for the duration of the time you continue to distribute the book, whichever is the greater. In advance of this publication, I would like to assign my royalties to the following people for services rendered. On the first 5,000 books, I would like my royalty equally divided between Mr. Tom Powers of Chappaqua, New York, and Miss Nell Wing of New York City. And so he even wanted some of his royalties to go to Tom. So Tom, Bill Wilson, Women and Womanizing. And to start off, I'm going to quote from page 69 of the big book. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiters of anyone's sex conduct. God alone can judge our sex situation. Now, whether that was a Bill Wilson's escape clause or but it sounds like good advice to me, so we'll try to do that and not be judgmental, or at least as little as possible. Tom himself had been sexually compulsive even after he quit drinking, and he found it very hard to change his behavior. Compulsive sex can be like alcoholic drinking or drug abuse, he said. It's just like gambling or spending money you don't have or eating yourself into a stupor. It's all supposed to be a lot of fun, but when the party's over, you feel worse about yourself than you did before, and so you go out and do it all over again. Tom said that it took him 5 years after he quit drinking to change his behavior in this area, and for 5 years after that, he tried to get Bill to change too. Now, you know how good that's going to work. You know, it's like a reformed drinker trying to get a drinker to quit, or an ex-smoker trying to get, somebody to quit. Anyway, according to Tom, Bill's behavior caused some of the most ardent admirers to break with him. Powers told Wilson that he thought his struggle with depression was caused, at least in part, by the guilt he felt over his faithfulness to Lois. Bill would always agree with me. I know, he'd say, you're right. Then just when I would think we were finally getting somewhere, he would say, but I can't give it up. Powers continues, quote, when I would press him as to why the hell not, he would start rationalizing. What would really kill me is when he'd say, well, Lois has always been more like a mother to me, which somehow was supposed to make it all right for him to cheat on her. Besides what he was doing to the women he was chasing and to Lois, Powers said his behavior was a huge source of controversy in AA. He would be very blatant about it. And there were times when it seemed like the reaction to a particularly flagrant episode would end up destroying everything he had worked for, but people would scurry around and smooth things over and cover it up. Actually, we do know that in the mid-1950s, around the time of his LSD experimentation, Wilson began a 15-year-long affair with a woman named Helen Wynn. They met at an AA meeting when Helen was new to sobriety. He was in his early 60s. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s. According to Frances Hartigan, who worked as Lois Wilson's secretary, this affair was different than any other. Bill thought that maybe he had found a soulmate. That's a picture of Bill and Helen. And the impression was that he was a ladies' man. Seems to have come from the way he sometimes behaved at AA gatherings. When Bill wasn't accompanied by Lois or later Helen, he could often be observed engage in animated conversation with an attractive young newcomer. His interest in younger women seemed to grow more intense with age. Barry Leach, who knew Bill nearly 30 years, told me, this is talking to Frances Hartigan, told me that other friends in the 60s, he and other friends of Bill's formed what they came to refer to as the Founders Watch Committee. People were delegated to keep track of Bill during the socializing that usually accompanies AA functions. When they observed a certain gleam in his eye, they would tactfully steer Bill off in one direction and the dewy-eyed newcomer in another. They never mentioned anything specific, but anyway, Gary Neidhart in his book, Bobby B. The Untold Story, says there are 5 books known to allege some kind of sexual impropriety by Bill W. One by Nan Robertson, Susan Cheever, of course, Bill W. by Frances Hartigan, Bill W. and Mr. W. and Dreaming, Hard Luck and Good Times in America. After careful checking of all 5 of these books, none of them mention Bobby in any way. And Bill and Bobby worked hand in glove in the 1940s in the AA office. But there's never any mention of Bill and Bobby. Could the 5 authors have missed such a story about Bobby and Bill? The Raphael book assertion of philandering relies on 2 of the mentioned authors, C. and Robertson, for sexual allegations against Bill, but without any specifics in the area Bobby lived and without a primary source. And Francis Hartigan conducted a 1999 interview with Tom P., in which Tom expressed his opinions of Bill's alleged sexual guilt 47 years before. Tom himself was around 87 years old. Susan Cheever quoted the same Tom P., himself a divorcee, relying entirely, according to her in notes, on Tom's oral history when he was probably older than he was for the Hartigan interview. What decades can do to alter memories. Nan Robertson made some sensational allegations about Bill's womanizing, with the only woman specifically named being Helen W., who appeared on the scene when Bill was suffering from signs of emphysema at the age of 61 in 1956. And also writing the big book addresses this too, that outside the scope of this book, there's the rumor that Bill was a serial adulterer. And despite the frequency that the story was retold by AA people who are critical of Bill, the claim has never been verified. AA's preeminent professional historian, Ernest Kurtz, was intrigued by the persistence of these rumors, and he spent considerable time and effort during the last few years of his life. We'll get to that in a minute. The last paragraph, Powers had been a close friend of Wilson's during the 1940s and 50s, but in the mid-50s they had a tumultuous falling out, and it was then that he began spreading stories about Bill's repeated illicit sexual conduct. Kurtz was significantly skeptical about these accusations because, as he noted in a recorded interview made on October 22nd, that Powers had offered this as an item of his knowledge, but there was no evidence of that. This is from the documentary Bill W., and the quote here that we're going to see is entitled "The Gold Standard to Independent Sources." This lack of a second source does not, of course, disprove rumors, but it should give one significant pause before wholeheartedly believing them. That was certainly Ernie Kurtz's conclusion. Note that none of this is meant to deny the fact that Bill Wilson did have a long-term extramarital affair with Helen Wynne in the closing decades of his life. See the sensitive but candid treatment of this topic in the documentary Bill W. Now, if I can do this right.
Are we cutting for some reason? Oh, my camera's went dead.
Can you hear that?
Maybe I'll up the volume a bit, Jim.
Okay. I can't. So it's, but Ernie Kurtz does go through that. Anyone who wants that, I can send the link to them. But Ernie Kurtz, as mentioned in the previous slides, talks about needing more backup information. He talked to all the people, and he said that all of the rumors came from Tom P. Or the idea of the Founders Watch, and he said he traced that down to Chattanooga, Tennessee, investigated with the people there in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they had never heard of anything like that. So I'm sure more will be revealed, but in the meantime, that's really all that we know, and that some of those rumors came from Tom P. Were they true? Were they not true? That's up to future historians to determine. So now we're going to talk about Tom, Bill, friends, and LSD. In a letter to Carl Jung in March of 1961, Bill says, lysergic acid is virtually harmless and quite non-addictive. Some of my AA friends and I have taken the material frequently and with much benefit. Once in the experience, there is a great broadening and deepening and heightening of consciousness which bears little or no relation to hallucination. More reality is seen and felt, not less. We have seen the whole range of valid spiritual experience precipitated in this manner. On my first trial, several years ago, my original spontaneous spiritual experience of 25 years before in Towns Hospital was reenacted with wonderful splendor and conviction. Bill had several experiments with LSD up to 1959, perhaps into the 1960s. Also participating were Eugene Exman, Tom Powers, and Lucille and David Kahn. David Kahn, well, both of them were great friends of Edgar Cayce. In January of 1944, so early on, Bill W. and Gerald Hurd met for the first time in Trabuco, California, and began a personal friendship and collaboration that would continue over the next 2 decades. In all, Bill made 3 visits to Trabuco College between 1944 and 1947. Tom Powers often spoke of Hurd as one of Bill Wilson's sponsors. So by this point in AA history, Bill was in fact making use of 2 co-sponsors or spiritual directors to help him in his explorations of the higher spiritual life. One of them, Father Ed Dowling, a Roman Catholic priest, and the other, Gerald Hurd, a philosopher who was deeply involved in Vedanta Hindu spirituality. It was Hurd who introduced Bill Wilson to Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley, of course, Brave New World and other books. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob had both been reading Gerald Hurd's books. One of Hurd's books even made it into Dr. Bob's library, called A Preface to Prayer. And they found his books fascinating. So when Bill made a trip to California and found that an AA member from Palo Alto named Dave D. had been to Trabuco and knew Hurd, he got him to arrange an introduction. In January 1944, Bill W. and Gerald Hurd met for the first time here at Trabuco and began a personal friendship and collaboration that would last for decades. That's the book Preface to Prayer by Gerald Hurd. On August 29, 1956, Bill Wilson took LSD for the first time, joining Gerald Hurd and Aldous Huxley in California and taking the psychedelic drug under the supervision of Dr. Sidney Cohen, a psychiatrist at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Los Angeles. AA member Tom Powers was also there. According to Don Lattin, Wilson was blown away by the drug and said the experience was a dead ringer for the famous night in the 1930s when he fell down on his knees and had an epiphany about founding the 12-step program. During the session, Betty Eisner and Tom acted as co-therapists, moderators during the experiment for Bill while Dr. Cohen quietly observed. At one point, this section is from Bob Kay. At one point, Tom became very moved, crying when Gregorian chants were played. She notes that Bill, noticeably more relaxed, looking years younger, also came close to crying twice, once when discussing his mother and again when discussing his father. She makes these further observations about Bill's experience of LSD therapy. I do think that there were 2 important parts, though. W's experience of himself as unloved and the perception that it was not through himself, but because of his parents that this occurred. And we talked about trust and the difficulty that W doesn't trust anybody. He can't let them close because he doesn't trust himself, that he may kill them before being killed, and the depressive will kill himself first. And here's an excerpt from a February 26, 1957 letter from Tom Powers to Betty on page 29 of Remembrances, something that she wrote. I think both you and Will are wonderfully good for W because you are among the very few people who are interested enough and loving enough to deal with him forthrightly and outside of the highly forced and artificial context of his position in AA. So there was a close relationship between Bill and Tom Powers. Something did him a whole lot of good, obviously visibly so, while he was out there this last time, and I think you and the LSD are very largely responsible. In a March 22, 1957, Bill wrote a letter to Betty Eisner, thanking her and her husband Will for their hospitality, and he notes, "Since returning home, I have felt and hope I have acted exceedingly well. I can make no doubt that the Eisner-Cohen-Powers LSD therapy has contributed not a little to this happier state of affairs." Powers wrote to Betty on April 13, 57, discussing the impact of Bill's use of LSD. Everyone notices how much better he is. He is very happy about it, and realizes what it is that has done it. There are no other references to Bill in remembrances that Betty wrote, except for a series of letters between Bill, Betty, and Powers concerning plans for other sessions or visits, both in California and New York. Apparently, however, these never took place. Bill and Tom Powers continue using LSD for several more years in New York, forming an experimental group during the late 50s that possibly extended into the 60s. The August 29, 1956 entry on the AA timeline referred to other reports about other people who had participated in the other experiments, including Nell Wing, Father Dowling, Sam Shoemaker, and Lois Wilson, Marty, and Helen Wynn. Here's how Betty Eisner, the USA psychologist who worked with Cohen, describes Bill Wilson's thinking as he came into the session and his reaction to the drug. Alcoholics Anonymous was actually considering using LSD. Alcoholics get to a point in the program where they need a spiritual experience, but not all of them are able to have one. Tom Powers was Bill Wilson's right-hand man in this. Tom had been through hell with alcoholism, so he brought Bill Wilson out to meet with us. Sidney Cohen, and I thought it might be a good idea to try a low dose together. But when I met Bill, I thought, this is going to be his therapy session. And that's one of the things it turned out to be. We each took 25 gamma except for Bill. Sid offered him several pills, and Bill said, "Don't ever do that to a drunk," and took 2. Bill took 2. If one pill's good enough, maybe I'll take 2. But the rest of us just took 1. At Bill's urging, Lois Wilson participated in that first session. She claimed to feel nothing spectacular, but did confess that she had a very pleasant time. Wilson wrote in September 26, 1956, letter to Heard. He said, and Wilson, "I do not think that in any way my state is related to my experience in looking through the doors of perception. In spite of my temporary condition, I do feel a residue of assurance and a feeling of enhanced beauty that seems to stay with me." A few months later, Wilson was even more upbeat about the long-term benefits from the LSD session. "More and more it appears to me that the experience has done a sustained good," he wrote to Heard on December 4th, 1956. "My reactions to things totally and in particular have very definitely improved for no other reason that I can see." Tom Powers says he has been thinking about the possibility of visiting you. Again, this is Bill talking. Tom Powers says he's been thinking about the possibility of visiting you soon again with a friend with the idea of trying this out some more. Powers may have made that trip and returned to New York with a generous supply of the drug, for he and Wilson were certainly committed to trying this out some more. Wilson became so intrigued by the spiritual potential of LSD that he formed the experimental group that we've already talked about. A letter from Tom Powers dated January 22nd, 1957, he wrote, "Dear Betty, thank you for your letter to me of the 12th and for letting me share of what you wrote, Zip. I would like to know much more about what happened when you took LSD. Even after the quite literal miracles with which my life has been blessed, I am still a person of so little faith that when the hand of God becomes obvious in certain events, I experience a kind of delightful uneasiness. It was so in our meeting with you and Will. After all that had happened on our trip, it seemed almost too good." The evening after, this is Tom again talking to Betty in a letter. "The evening after I had returned from California, I had a wonderful talk with my mother and dad. I told them about the new LSD experience, and we talked particularly about the beauty of the worlds which are revealed and how these undoubtedly are the worlds in which the soul finds itself when it leaves the body for good. The next day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, quite suddenly and unexpectedly, my dad died. He went very quickly and gently and easily. Very much happened then in the days immediately following that I would like to tell you about, but not now and not in a letter anyhow. I do not have an extra copy of the report. So his father died then. And on Friday, January 25th, Betty replied, "Dear Tom, we are so pleased to have your letter. It was very extraordinary about your father. Sometime I should like to hear what happened. The death of a man's father is a very important event in his life, and I'm sure that there was, on the one hand, much involvement, and on the other hand, much freeing." On February 26, 1957, another letter from Tom. "Dear Betty," here we have it in letter form. "I wrote a brief note on the other day. I've had too much work the past 6 weeks, and I'm really a little punchy. Your report of our 25G session came today, together with an earlier report. I'll return all of these along with the other material I have to send back to you. I think both you and Will, her husband, are wonderfully good for W because you are among the very few people who are interested enough and loving enough to deal with him forthrightly and outside of the highly forced and artificial context." Next paragraph, "The great thing about LSD is that it permits the realization that reality is here and now, and that only the thinnest kind of dream separates the ego-bound consciousness from the always existent, free child of God. Our experience together was no exception, and I am grateful to have been with you and Will in your lovely home when the clearest of the glimpse was open to me. Something persists after the experience too, and it persists this time more strongly than before. The drug is a wonderful help, but it is a crutch, and I'm sure that in time we can get along without the crutch." So this is just some insights into Tom Power and his experience. In Western Union, June 25th, 1957, it seems that Tom has to postpone a trip. Trip postponed until the August. Letter follows. Tom. On Saturday, June 29th, Betty says, "Dear Tom, I didn't know how much your coming meant to me until I had your wire that your plans had changed. Is there any possibility that you and W. Wilson might be coming out on the TV show in July? You see, I'm leading a psychotherapeutic seminar for the Rathburns, the Sequoia Seminar in Ben Lomond. Ben Lomond is a place, not a person. From August 18th to August 25th. After the seminar, we have a few days in Los Angeles and then leave for New York. Our American Psychological Association meetings are over Labor Day, and I think I'm going to be presenting a paper. I'll be in New York from about the 30th to September 5th. Will go down to Washington on business in a few days in New York, and I'll join him there. I was hoping to see you while I was back there, but it wouldn't do for my LSD session, nor would it work between Ben Lomond, her seminar, and New York. Is it at all possible to make your trip the first part of August rather than the latter? It seems that they were going to have another speaker there besides her. And she says, Thomas Merton just isn't a substitute for Thomas Powers, much as some of his things help. With love, and please let me know, Betty. So it seems, at least to some people, that Tom Powers was not only on the same plane as, but seems to be even more respected than Thomas Merton. In July 17th, 57, he said, Dear Betty, yes, it will be good to be with you again. A lot has been happening both here and there. I'm sure we won't have anything near enough time to get talked out, but we'll make a dent in the situation anyhow. The greatest effect of the experience for me has come in the past 2 or 3 months. A lot of what I knew under LSD is coming back, not as a permanent state, but as quite steady, intermittent awareness. It isn't like a recurrence of the experience, of course, but it comes pretty close to it. I think we called them flashbacks in the day. The net result is a drastic deproblemization of my whole life. Things are still tough here and there, but it is a matter of dealing with conditions, not problems. It is hard to describe, but the connection with LSD is unmistakable. I think it will be years before we really begin to know the possibilities of this experience. Love to all, Tom. And this is these were experiments. For those who haven't heard about this, Bill and these people were experimenting with an experimental drug. This was not yet Tom Leary and tune in, drop out and recreational type drug. There was an experimental drug that was being used to see if it could help schizophrenics and alcoholics particularly. So then Tom breaks with Bill and AA. And from AA to AAA, all Addicts Anonymous. Tom Powers, who was hired as the official AA writer in 1948 and traveled with Bill and worked with him on 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, has feelings that are typical of the way loyalty to Bill Wilson sometimes turns to anger. Powers lives to give an example, Bill at one time was on good terms with Hank Parkhurst and with Clarence Snyder and with Tom Powers. Loyalty to Bill Wilson sometimes turns to anger. Powers lived in East Ridge, the commune in upstate New York he founded after breaking with Bill, supposedly over Bill's behavior, in 1958 to form eventually All Addicts Anonymous. Eventually, Tom broke with Bill. I told him that I still considered him to be my sponsor. This is Tom speaking, of course, but that I didn't want to work with him anymore. I said that I still hoped that we could be friends, but I didn't want to have anything more to do with him publicly. I just couldn't go on feeling as though I was in any way supporting what he was doing to Lois and to himself. Bill said, fine, I feel the same way about you too, and we shook on it, as though it were some mutually agreed upon parting of the ways with fault on both sides. Which was the real switcheroo, I think he knew that I saw right through it, but I guess it made him feel better not to have to take responsibility for destroying what had been a very enjoyable and productive working relationship. It must have been very hard for you to break with him, I said. This is, I think, Fran Hardigan. Oh, it was terrible, Tom said, but I just couldn't take it anymore. Lois was like a sponsor to me too. I loved them both too much to continue to have any part of it. Ever since Bill Wilson and Dr. Smith founded Alcoholics Anonymous, people with addictions have been meeting together. This is some of the AAA literature have been meeting together to help each other live life free of their personal devil, be it alcohol, cocaine, heroin, prescription drugs, food, gambling, sex. AA not only gave thousands of alcoholics hope for a normal way of life, but also it begat all kinds of 12-step fellowships that mirrored the AA approach and save for a word in the first step. The word alcohol brought a man named Tom Powers to Wilson and AA. An atheist, Powers underwent a spiritual transformation eventually as he struggled with his alcoholism and drug addiction, finally coming to terms with them through the power of surrender that members of 12-step programs know all about. That was in 1946, but for Powers, who died in 2005 at 93, that wasn't the end of the struggle. After the booze and the drugs, he realized he was addicted to smoking, then to overeating, and a lot of other behavior he could not control. He saw addiction as a moving target, says Matt D., the 32-year-old man who has followed in Powers' footsteps. He worked hard at overcoming all addictions. In fact, Powers was so impressed by the 12-step approach in life of AA that he set out to make them available to anyone, not just alcoholics. He began with a group dubbed the Nut Club, which included people who were not alcoholics. And this effort at applying the 12 steps to deal with all types of harmful, habitual, compulsive behavior led to the founding of East Ridge in 1964. Matt D., who knew Tom well and is in charge of his All Addicts Anonymous archives. That was from Matt D. This also is from Matt D. I had a couple of telephone interviews with Matt, the director of AAA, and knew Tom Powers, and what I got from him were anecdotal information. I could never get anything written specifically, what we would call historical, but anecdotal information. These are based on two telephone interviews that I had with him last month. That he in 1941 he was drinking after about 10 months of 1941. He had a hot flash. He actually had a spiritual experience similar to Bill's, but he didn't have a Dr. Silkworth who told him that it was not a hallucination. After 5 years and 7 or 8 bug houses, as he called them, he went through shock treatments, chemical metrazole seizures. And he finally woke up one day and realized that he had said, "Oh, God, help me." And he was a seeker, a theist, and practiced the steps as a believer starting in 1946 in a growing and evolving way. Ernie Kurtz says it was Tom's idea to do the second edition. I personally, this is what Matt said, I personally could not find anything in Ernie Kurtz that said that, but maybe it's there. And there are a lot of recordings. If you want to listen to, of course, on the right there, that's Father Bill W. And Two-Way Prayer, and there are a lot of Tom Powers recordings where he talks about he talks about his story. And I didn't find much historical in those, but he does talk a lot about his story. He also mentioned, this is something that I personally find hard to believe, but that there were 2 books that Bill read, The Varieties of Religious Experience, which he probably didn't read actually, but he said one time he thumbed through it. And then the other book was The Little Flowers of St. Francis. And reading it, supposedly this came to Bill Wilson through the Oxford group, and I just can't see the Oxford group recommending the poor little one, St. Francis, some of the saccharine, saintly stories that are in that coming from the Oxford group to Bill Wilson, but who knows? Even I read in other historians, 1 or 2 who mentioned that this book was also read by Bill. Very, very, very Catholic book. That's why I find it hard to believe that the Oxford group would push it. Anyway, no proof. East Ridge is a recovery community in Hankins, 100 hillside acres overlooking the Delaware River in Sullivan County. It began as a drying out place and became home to 68 men, women, and children, and a focal point for what Powers was trying to do. And he worked closely with Wilson on the writing of AA texts, continued to hold meetings open to all comers at East Ridge, existing as a sort of heretical AA group. He finally realized this wasn't working since he knew people from other 12-step programs. He began holding a different meeting every week. Alcohol this week, narcotics next week, then sex, then gambling, and finally in the 80s he decided to simplify. He put all the addictions in one basket and began a new fellowship, All Addicts Anonymous. AAA today remains a small fellowship when compared to AA, a major reason being that Powers, a strong believer in AA, followed its tradition of attraction rather than promotion. It's difficult to attract people when you're living in a remote, if beautiful, part of upstate New York. Matt, the young man mentioned previously, is part of the East Ridge community whose members have decided to let the world know at least a little bit about All Addicts Anonymous. I'm running. Mickey also lives at East Ridge. He started in Dallas. He considered himself a success in life. All Addicts Anonymous, besides using the 12 steps, also uses the 4 absolutes, and the big book. You can see why some people might prefer to wait for a pill to cure their addiction, but to the people of East Ridge and AAA members and groups being established elsewhere, it's about more than not habitually abusing themselves. Indeed, as Powers and others who have written on spiritual matters through the ages recognized, any person, addict or not, can make these absolutes a guide to a different kind of life. Before this was Fran Hartigan, who wrote that. He was interviewing Tom Powers. He saw a picture of Bill hanging there in their room there at East Ridge, and he admired it. And before he left, Tom gave him a copy of it, and it was signed by Bill. Bill had autographed it to Tom with deep affection and gratitude. And Hartigan told him, he said, "You were a great admirer of Bill's." And Tom said, "I still am. I never stopped loving the guy. He was a great man." Just quickly, going longer than I thought, Tom Powers is credited with applying the 12-step program, the treatment of other addictions. There's a book called 24, and the program is a life jacket. I mentioned that one that you can also find. He wrote the book First Questions on the Life of the Spirit, and that eventually came to have a couple of other names. In the author's preface, he says, this is about as autobiographical as he gets. Since the person, and this is Tom speaking in the author's preface, since the personal element is inescapable and since responsibility for it should be taken, perhaps it will help for the author to identify himself briefly. I was born in Chadron, Nebraska in 1911. At the age of 29, I was a liberal, scientific, humanist, atheist, agnostic, a real omelet. I was an agreeable, witty, thin, and nervous fellow. I was doing very well in the advertising business, but at the same time I was suffering from mentally and physically crippling disease that the doctors at last pronounced incurable. Doctors are a solemn lot anyhow. These doctors were not fooling. I had to believe them. Much against the grain of my whole outlook at the time, I was persuaded to seek help in the area of a spiritual experience. I didn't know what it was, and it sounded suspiciously like a religion. But in desperation, finally, I was willing to try it. It worked. The disease was arrested and eventually fully relieved. But the process went much further. Over a period of years, many problems, previously only half realized, began to come to the surface to be corrected. A lively cooperation was necessary. But a power greater than myself obviously was doing the job. Somewhere along the line, I began trying to be a Christian. I am still trying. I'm also strongly drawn to the truth in other great religions. I must say that acquaintance with the teachings and the people of other religions has never lessened, but on the contrary has deepened my devotion to Christ Jesus. I believe that all men are children of one Father, and that while it's perhaps inevitable that we should differ about his nature and names, it is a planetary shame and scandal that we get into bloody quarrels about such things. The book itself does talk a lot about the evolution and the contribution of other religions. Only one considerable point of disagreement occurred among my helpers and counselors in the preparation of this work. We were not of one opinion about the advisability of including a wide variety of material pertaining in the many religions and psychological systems of the world. He didn't want to confuse people. But I am seriously impressed with the limitations and difficulties, including many divine sources. But he did. And he says he just did not feel at home in a lot of places. He says, I'm a member of a Christian community and cherish its interests, but I started out in the regenerate life as a mongrel, mothered and taught by mongrels. I have an essential kinship with the breed. Next paragraph, although now a professing Christian, I am still a mongrel. In what I find truth, in that I find truth, get help, and take delight in other religions, past and present. And the last paragraph says, I've written this book and have suggested other books, not only for my brother Christians, but also for my brother mongrels. It was originally called The First Questions on the Life of the Spirit. And he ends it, Thomas E. Powers, and then the book begins right off. Does God really exist? Then he goes through those questions. He mentions that he became a member of the layman's movement, which is popular in those days. Members who participated, Harry Truman and Dale Carnegie. This 24 magazine that I mentioned before, The Power of Absolute Honesty in Politics, was published by Thomas E. Powers, publisher Thomas R. Powers, editor Thomas R. White. And they talked about a lot of things. He contributed to that magazine. To my knowledge, there's no evidence that in his relationship to Christianity, Bill ever became anything more than what he called a shopper at the theological pie counter. And throughout his dialogue with Dowling on matters of faith, Father Ed surely appreciated his great openness to the workings of grace. In May 1959, Father Ed wrote to Bill with the dates when he would be in New York City with the Summer School of Catholic Action, in the hope that Bill and Lois might be available to see him. He included a copy of the appreciative letter he had sent to Wilson's friend Tom Powers. In gratitude for the copy Tom sent of his book, First Questions on the Life of the Spirit. Tom sent it to Father Ed. Bill replied on June 2nd, saying he likewise hoped to see Father Ed and that he had not yet read Powers' book. Quote, Bill says, but a peek at it leaves me a little puzzled. He added, for Tom's approach when expressing his own philosophy was different from that which Bill, took when discussing AA. Tom is on the side of perfection or bust. And he said that Tom Powers had disagreements on that issue. Ernie Kurtz observed that the fellowship's explicit rejection of any claim of perfection, of course, came about, but Tom Powers, co-founder, someone wrote a testimonial to the book. This is not a stuffy academic discourse on spiritual life. It is a powerfully written handbook on how to find God by a man who did so to his own vast surprise. For those who are already tentatively or securely committed to a religious faith, this book offers a guide toward deeper understanding of the spiritual life. For those who do not believe in God, but who are troubled by what G.K. Chesterton called the first wild doubts of doubt, it is a compelling invitation to a great experiment. The next version of the First Questions of the Spirit was called An Invitation to a Great Experiment. The same book, just a new title. And some brief facts. Running out of time, I don't want to go into all of this about the All Addicts. They have a website where you can look at some more. Who we are, All Addicts Anonymous. They're very big on Gresham's Law and Alcoholics Anonymous. That if you're not doing it my way, you're doing it wrong. And that there are three kinds of recovery: strong tea, weak tea, and no tea. All Addicts Anonymous, old-fashioned AA, as adapted for all addicts and all addictions. AAA members are distinctive in their acceptance of the suggested program of the 4 absolutes, the 12 steps, and the 10 points. And the 10 points are basically taken from Chapter 5. Completely give yourself, practice vigorous honesty, go to any lengths. Realize there is no softer, easier way. This is an old newsletter from 2011, but they had a newsletter. They sell rosaries and prayer beads and have sing-alongs, and they do things. There's even never heard of this one, Patrick, but there's a 20-page article in which early AA pioneer and mentor of Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith, Sam Shoemaker, gives a commentary and a fresh perspective on each of the 12 steps of the AA program, and they sell that along with all their other literature on their website. I don't have time to read this, but Tom P., there's a letter from Tom P. to his sponsor, who was an exchange of correspondence in his AA sponsor, Sumner Campbell, that we remember from earlier. In the spring of '69, their relationship had begun 25 years earlier, so Sumner was still Tom's sponsor. Don't have time to read it all this, but just the things that a sponsor talks about. And then the third reincarnation of the same book was to be called All Addicts Anonymous, originally written and published as First Questions, and then he was actually had a grant funded to write the book, and it wasn't exactly what you'd call a big book. It was a little thin, but this was the author's preface says, "My name is Tom P., and I'm an alcoholic addict, a drug addict, a tobacco addict, a crazy eater, a sex nut, a worry addict, a liar addict, lying addict, a depressing sink out, a resentment addict, and an anxiety freak. Since I've been a member of several of the so-called anonymous fellowships based on the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got a grant from the Layman's Movement to write this book." And that's how that book was written. And from the Sullivan County Democrat, an obituary, Tommy Powers, who founded Eastridge 93, of Hankins, the founder, with his son Tom Powers Jr. of Eastridge, and Hankins died Wednesday, April 27th, 2005 at his home. He was 93 years of age, the son of late Thomas Francis and Catherine Vitruba Powers. He was born June 7th in Chadron, Nebraska. Eastridge is a recovery center for people with all kinds of addictions. During his business career, he worked as a commercial artist, radio and television program director, advertising and marketing executive, author, editor, and publisher. Since 1964, he was chairman and general supervisor of all the businesses and projects of Eastridge. Private funeral services will be held Friday. Graveside services and burial will be made in the Callicoon Cemetery. He ended up his introduction to his book with this phrase: "In my own search, many people and many groups have given me help, much of which I am not in a position to acknowledge here. There is one group of spiritual pioneers on the earth at this time to whom I owe the most. They know who they are, and they know how much I owe them." A little bit about Tom Powers, a couple of slide pictures from the documentary Bill W., and that is my take so far on Tom P.
And what a tremendous take it is, Mr. Jim Early. Awesome stuff. Please unmute yourselves. I'm sure you will. That was brilliant, Jim. Wow.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Wow.
Great.
Thank you, Jim.
That was
Fabulous.
Brilliant, Jim.
Brilliant.
Thanks much.
Good work, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Answered a lot of questions I had.
Oh, yeah, it was not easy finding a lot of these things. He's scattered all over and through a lot of bios and stories and things. So, but it was fun.
Excellent. Very good.
Well, thank you ever so much. Jim, you're doing a presentation soon for, I think, Bob Hickey. Is that right? Something on Fitzmayo. Is that?
Yes, that's going to do a presentation on Fitzmayo in June. Bob, are you here? 15th? I believe it's on a Sunday.
Yeah. And you said you're going to do that for us, I think, in September. Isn't that right?
Yeah, August or September. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. So, just wanted to mention at the beginning, Marty M is going to be with us on the 16th of August, and she's going to be back on not Marty M, but Millie is going to be doing the presentation on Marty M on the 16th and Florence R on the 23rd. And we have Gary Neuhardt on the 9th, and we have Chris Johnson on the 2nd. And next week, Rob, what have we got next week? Did you tell me? We have a Tradition 10.
Tradition 10 next week with Lynn S.
Lynn S, thank you very much. Let's go. I think we should go straight into Q&A. You can see what we have coming up for the rest of the month. Tradition 10, and the story build up with the spiritual sponsor. And it looks a great lineup for May as well. We've got Sam Shoemaker, Tom Finnegan is doing that. And then we got Shane Butler, Benign Anarchy, and Lynn is back, and then Drew, of course, is here, and Ken B. So let's go straight into the questions. Jim, you ready? Shall we go with the questions, Jim? Yeah.
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you, Jim. Lindsay, how are you doing in the Bay Area?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been coming to AA for like 22 years, and I didn't know a lot of that stuff. So that was really, it's so fun to hear new information, and that those were rumors that he was cheating on his wife. That's so good too. I've definitely heard that. It's so funny, and then I was trying to look up the All Addicts Anonymous. I've never heard of that, but there's not too much information about it. It's weird.
No.
But I just wanted to say thank you, and yeah, that was really fun. I'm so glad I came.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hope to see you again. And we're going to San Francisco. Kenji. Kenji, you're muted. Who was doing that to you, Kenji?
Who had the nerve to mute Kenji?
Who had the nerve to do that?
Hey, so that was so interesting. Thank you. I looked for All Addicts Anonymous, and they have a website, but there's almost nothing there. Yeah. They list 8 online meetings around the world, grand total of 8, and no mention of face-to-face meetings anywhere. And I Googling it, I couldn't find any either. Did you happen to come upon any information about whether that still exists?
No, I really don't. I focused on the historical part, how it kind of related to AA and Tom in the AA story. I didn't find much information either. I do know that it still exists. Like I said, I had a couple of telephone interviews with Matt D, the director, and no, I don't know much about it currently.
So it does exist as a recovery community in that one location?
As far as I know, yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. I've been told it's Miley. It's the lady's name, not Millie. I call her Millie. It's Miley. I beg your pardon. It's Miley. I should have known that. So there you go. Thank you. Jimmy, just before we go to you, Gloria's got a hand up. She wants to come in. She just told me she wants to ask. No, you don't want to ask a question. You don't. I thought you did. Okay, we're going back to Jimmy C. Jimmy, you were reading Hartigan's book earlier. How's that for you? That presentation helped?
Thank you so much, Jim. I have one question. If you came across anything with Tom Powers and his endorsement of Synanon, maybe you don't know what Synanon is, but I'm just Synanon started in California and there's kind of its own little thing, but I don't know if you found anything that the Daytop Village that kind of tended to the East Ridge or East.
No, I know what Synanon is. I did not run across anything where Tom Powers was related to Synanon.
Or endorsed it or anything like that. Okay, thanks so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Jimmy C. And we're going to Thomas Nias.
Yes, Jim, another fine presentation. I just wanted there's one thing. The 5 books that were cited from Gary Neuhardt's material, the Inside Alcoholics Anonymous, Getting Better, by Nan Robertson. It was listed as 1998, and the copyright on it is actually 1988. And I guess it was significant because Nan was the first person that didn't sanitize the material and really wrote about this relationship with Helen Wynn. And They say many people knew about that before, but never wrote about it. But I had a question, Jim. When you started off, you said that Tom and Bill Wilson first met in August 1941 in a meeting. But then the statement was made that Tom went to his first AA meeting in October of 1941.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you caught that. I knew somebody would catch that. I should have guessed it would have been you. But, yeah, that was something, and it's in a couple different places where I read it, and it is interesting. But it says that he met Bill Wilson in August, and then his first meeting was in October. So I kind of assumed that, I don't know where he met Bill Wilson, but I think he said he was telling his bedtime story or something. And I caught that, what I thought was maybe an inconsistency too. Yeah. And but he actually said, I met Bill Wilson at such and such a day. And there were two different places, too. I'm sure you noticed. And so I just, I don't have that much backup on it, but I just, that's what I assumed, that he met Bill at something, I don't know, a talk, or maybe it wasn't a meeting too, where he heard his story, but then it was in October that he first got sober. Thank you. Good eye as usual, Tom. And I'll check on that publication date on the Nan Robertson book. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And now we're going to our Al-Anon friend, Ginny.
Okay. Al-Anon and other things, I'll say. So I have some information about AAA. So I live on Cape Cod and go to Al-Anon since 2014, and was so interested in the Big Book. So, long story short, was a meeting I heard about. Like there was like some double winners in my Al-Anon meeting, and I heard about this meeting that was a Big Book study of all addictions. And I went to it once. My boyfriend's I won't say rabid. He's a traditional AA person. He came with me, and it was good. It was in person. It was in a library in Brewster. I forgot what town it was. This was before COVID, and I loved it. And then when COVID broke out, I went to the meeting on Zoom. And here's the thing that actually I didn't mind it at first because I just wanted to listen, and they would read the book. The Big Book. It was the Big Book. I never heard about the Absolutes. I never heard about Tom Powers, which I really enjoyed your presentation, Jim, because I really loved all that, all these people writing about the LSD stuff and everything. Anyway, I don't want to go all over the place, but about this, the all addiction meeting, and I also looked it up online, and this meeting said that they did the Big Book, the Hyannis method, Hyannis, so we would go around the room and everybody would read from the book, for maybe the first half hour of the Big Book. They have a whole schedule of what week they're doing what. And then they would share, but only if you've been through the Big Book, the Hyannis method, only if you've been taken through the steps with the Big Book and the Hyannis method could you share. So they would go to everybody, and everybody would say, who hadn't done it, they'd say, my name is Susan and I'm reading. And everybody would say that. And then the few people that had done it would say, I've been through the Big Book, the Hyannis method, and I, blah, blah, blah. They would recite the whole thing and then they would share, which was fine because it was all new to me. After a few years during COVID, it would be maybe 8 people in this meeting or 15, whatever. Oh, and they would have a speaker each meeting on the Zoom meetings who would share on whatever those pages were. But then, after a while, just nobody else could share except these same 5 people, and it was boring. So I like that you said that somebody said in your presentation, you said it was they were very our way or the highway kind of thing. So I found that you'd think all addictions it would be super super open, but there was something closed about it. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jimmy.
loved hearing all that about that Tom Powers. I didn't know anything about him.
Jenny. And Jim's got a Facebook page, History Only, it's titled. I mean, it's well worth to dive into that one. So I think Rob has already put in the chat. Mike, hello, Mike. Thank you for waiting, sir. Over to you.
Hello. Mike,
we can hear you, Mike. Yep, you're good. Where are you coming in from? Where are you coming from?
I'm in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, just west of Toronto. What Jim talked about today, I've pretty much read everything there is. And nothing was new to me, except I want to ask Jim a question. How do you remain non-judgmental in this? Because I certainly have opinions about these two characters.
Yeah. And I have found that if I try to stick as much as I possibly can to history and what's written and leave as much as possible my opinions and perspective out of it, the better I get along with other people in all aspects of my life. That if as soon as I start preaching my opinion of what something says, then I get into trouble. What does it say? We step on the toes of others and they retaliate. And, I try to keep virtually everything that you saw on those slides today is borrowed, from, real historians. Yeah. In historical sources as much as possible, and I try to keep, and there are things, I mean, if you're talking LSD or womanizing or pretty much any of the topics we talked about today, boy, there are opinions, all over AA. And I try to just present the history as best I can, and not get into, well, but I think, because it's when I, as a historian, and I'm not a historian, I just kind of copy and paste and stand on the shoulders of giants. But when I get it off of the topic of history and start connecting the dots, there are a lot of dots in AA history. And when I try connecting them and speculating, then I can lose a certain objectivity that a historian should have. Yes. And to be sure, every human being has prejudices and perspectives and agenda, whether they're hidden or subconscious or whatever, but trying to keep as much as possible objective, keeps me out of trouble. It's when I decide that, and believe me, as we all know who've ever been in a business meeting of AA or any meeting of AA, that we can argue about everything, and wherever you have 4 alcoholics together, you have at least 10 opinions. And, we'll argue with ourselves. Well, I mean real, but I don't mean real, alcoholic. So I just try to stick to just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. I watch Dragnet a lot.
Thank you. I'll have to remember that. I've done a number of talks around town here, and every time I somehow make it personal, and it doesn't go over well. I agree with you. But,
yeah.
But I still have my opinions.
Of course. We all have opinions, and we know what they're like.
Yeah.
We all have opinions, and we all have the other thing too.
Well, I see 2 very desperate men, 2 very, very desperate men chasing.
So the more informed our opinion, Mike, the better it is, right? The more informed our opinion, the better it is. Hope to see you again, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to Texas now. Dee Dee.
Hi, Jim. Dee Dee Alcoholic. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I've always questioned in the back of my mind about, the taboo lifestyle that Bill had. Although I am feel a little more comfortable that he was doing these experiments with a physician present. That makes it a little more legal, so to speak. But I had a couple of, I recognized that the AAA, seems to, and the presentation slides, I can't remember everything, but I saw a lot of religion and politics. Did I see politics, that in one of the slides, Democrat of politics? Democrat.
There's a book on politics you mustn't know.
There's a book on, so.
Oh, yeah. It's called Rigorous Honesty in Politics.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the, I think it was the 24 magazine that Tom Powers, published and wrote some for. Yeah. They talked about rigorous honesty in politics.
And in the, program itself, it looks like he drew in religion with the rosary. A rosary is symbolic, for Catholicism.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure what the role, you mentioned something about Father Bill W. and two-way prayer.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
What is the relation?
Well, they're all kind of, AAA, Father Bill, two-way prayer, Matt D. They're all kind of together. Father Bill is also, talked about the, what was the second name of the book? The questions in, The Great Experiment. If you look up Father Bill, there's a YouTube of Father Bill and, about Tom Powers and the Great Experiment.
Okay.
It's called Invitation to the Great Experiment. With those things. But yeah, it was very, against the traditions of AA in that, yes, they talked about politics and yes, Tom Powers was Roman Catholic and they sell rosaries and I think prayer beads too or whatever. But, it's not so much as separated, by with the traditions of AA that says that we should avoid politics, alcohol reform, and sectarian religion.
Yeah. And so much for God of my understanding. It's got to be their understanding.
Pretty much. They use the 12 steps and as they're written and things, but, you got to have that spiritual experience and just much more of a religious, for example, when he was telling his story at the beginning of the book that he wrote, he says, I'm a Christian, and he mentions, the lay movement and things like that, whereas Bill Wilson publicly, avoided like the plague, any mention of his own particular religious, beliefs, so, Tom didn't, and that's, there were things that, that they differed in, but they, for a very long time, they were good buddies. They traveled together. They worked together. They, heavy stuff, working on the 12 and 12 and the second edition and AA Comes of Age. And, he was another of that, those people like Hank Parkhurst, like Clarence, where in the beginning they had really good relationships and then eventually they didn't have good relationships. But Tom, even towards the end, said, I still love the guy,
Yeah.
So
the last thing.
We keep it for after the meeting. I'm going to say you've had 3 questions. Let's keep it for the meeting.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And then we keep it for the meeting after the meeting. Patrick, did you want to come in?
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. That was fascinating. I've read about him and followed him a little bit, but never went down any, rabbit holes. But, you know, the way that his schism developed, it seems perfectly natural to me when you're in an early stage in those first decade. I mean, people used to say, you know, if you're in AA and AA is only 85 years old, any Christian that was around back at 1 AD, they were called founders at that time. I mean, they were still making it up as they went along, and we're still making it up as we go along, as it says in 164, where it says, we know only a little. Okay, there's more still coming along. But I love the way that he moved along, and I think it's quite common to have people in AA just take a tack that maybe isn't consistent with the others. And, you know, whether it be in religious or I got sober with a nun, a priest. I had a sponsor that was a Jesuit. There was all different types of, you get to a certain point and we just don't want to go there. And sometimes you just go to a different group. And I look at my area here around Boston. There are 1,700 separate meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous a week around here. That means that's fine. There's room for dissension among the ranks as long as we stay sober. But I thought that's great. I never heard of the Sam Shoemaker stuff, and I'm going to track that down. The tapes. Yeah. I couldn't find it, but I really appreciate. I could listen to this stuff because it's unplowed fields. It was, you know, it's like early theology for us. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Coming for you. That's nice. But I'll send you that thing, the little blurb that it says about Sam Shoemaker talking about 12 steps one at a time or whatever that they have for sale. I just want to real quickly, Dee Dee brought something up that I don't know why I either skipped the slide or something happened. During the last 6 weeks of Bill's life, you know, he was bedridden. You know, he was on oxygen. He was in and out of consciousness, and things were left. But a lot of people were, as is normal, people were visiting him to say goodbye. And Tom Powers was one of those people in the last 6 weeks of Bill's life. He went to Stepping Stones, and Tom White, who was, in that crowd, drove Tom Powers to Stepping Stones and waited for him outside while Tom Powers went up and said goodbye to Bill Wilson. Would have loved to be a fly on the wall. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And we call this the last one for now. We go to Jack A.
Hi, Jack.
Jack.
You know, I'm kind of unnerved by some of this information, and none of it is really particularly new. I've known about Bill's foray into LSD and the stories of his sexual dalliances, and I've had a friend from Hollywood, California. And apparently Bill was active in that area, and he told many of the stories that were told about keeping an eye on him and things like that. But as far as the LSD goes, the discussion of LSD has been much different than my experience. And I'm sure you've all heard of peyote and the Native American use of peyote in spiritual rites. So this is not the idea of using these types of drugs in this way is not anything new. And I kind of like that Bill was flawed. You know, I feel closer to the guy knowing that he was flawed, because I'm certainly flawed, and I did a lot of LSD. And there's a book that came out, The Spirituality of Imperfection. And I really like that, because that's really kind of like the mantra that I live by is, you know, the spirituality of imperfection. And having, you know, the founder of the movement that I follow, you know, being a flawed human being, that's all right with me. And there's something about, and I would label Bill W. as in that category of greatness. That doesn't remove his flaws, but I think greatness would apply to him. And it seems like there's a relationship between infidelity and greatness. I don't know really what that connection is, but it seems like a lot of great people have that flaw. And I don't know for sure. I'm just kind of winging it, but thank
you. I laughed when you mentioned the spirituality of imperfection. I highly recommend that book by Ernest Kurtz and Ketchum, Kathleen Ketchum, I believe, and excellent book on spirituality of imperfection. And there was a letter somebody wrote in to Bill taking his inventory, and he wrote his famous pedestal letter, and saying, well, I'm sorry that you're not happy with me. You're not the only one, but I'm just trying to get by, and I've never claimed to be a Superman, and if you put me on a pedestal, nobody can live up there on a pedestal, so.
One of my favorite lines in the big book is, "We are not saints."
Yep.
And I think that you presented some very sensitive information with a great deal of care and responsibility, and I respect you for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to. I've done this several times, some with more detail even on some of these things, and just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Dragnet for us old people who remember, the detectives from San Francisco. I guess it was San Francisco.
That's a nice way to finish, Jack. Yeah, thanks very much, sir. Jim, we're going back to you to close in a manner of your choosing.
All right, I'm gonna just because it seems to fit with some of the things that we talked about today. I don't know how I ended up down there. Let me find it again. Oops. There we go. This is and you can find a hint of the other world, the beyond, in this prayer. And I like this prayer a lot. It was Bill's daily prayer. You can tell that he typed it because there are a lot of typos in it, but it's a prayer that I like. And first of all, thank you, David. Thank all of you for being here, and thank you for inviting me and for all the good comments. What I do in spreading what I have learned is indeed a labor of love. And this was Bill's morning prayer. O Lord, we thank thee that thou art, that we are from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be thy holy name and all thy benefactions to us, of light, of love, and of service. May we find and do thy will in good strength and good cheer today. May thy ever-present grace be discovered by family and friends, those here and those beyond, by our societies throughout the world, by men and women everywhere, and among those who must lead in these troubled times. O Lord, we know thee to be all wonder, all beauty, all glory, all power, all love. Indeed, thou art everlasting love. Accordingly, thou hast fashioned for us a destiny, passing through thy many mansions, ever in more discovery of thee, and in no separation from ourselves. For all these great wonders, benefactions, and assurances, we now raise hearts and minds to thee, O Father of lights. We are filled with gratitude that shall be timeless.
Amen. So thank you to Jim Worley again. Let's hear it for Jim Worley one more time. And all he does for A.
Thank you, Jim, so much.
Jim.
Such beautiful work.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Wonderful too.
Fantastic job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Really good.
Thanks, guys. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kevin.
Jim, where are you located?
Cancun, Mexico.
Oh, my goodness.
Somebody's got to do it.
I know. Year round. You're there year round?
I am.
Wow.
I have to live here in December and January, February.
Terrible.
Yeah, well,
Really
like I
must-
say.
You must miss the snow. We had some at noon today here.
Yeah, well, I don't miss the snow at all. It got Cancun cold this morning. It got down to 65.
Oh,
my.
Where were you from originally? Northeast?
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Oh, well, that's near Aaron Curtis' hometown. That's where he hung out.
Some of us think that Tom Powers did more than edit the 12 and 12, and that's kind of based on circumstantial evidence. But the fact that Bill kind of slid him some royalties that he didn't have to, that might indicate. But the 12 and 12 is an interesting book. It is all over the place. It's it's preachy at times. It's liberal at times. All other evidence showed Bill Wilson getting more liberal as time went on, and you read things like Anarchy Melts in 1946. And the 12 and 12 is almost a step backwards in some way, and very much in keeping with the Reform Center like Tom Powers. The other interesting thing, the people that want Bill Wilson to be a virgin or near virgin, they do the one source Tom Powers as this was some sort of getting even, and he was, their relationship wasn't that bad even after they parted. You mentioned the visit at the end, the words when they parted. So I think Tom Powers has a lot of credibility. Further, he is not the only source of this type of stuff. And, Wally P says that James Houck, in the early Oxford group days, that Wilson used to brag about his exploits in Wall Street. And, then the Carolyn C. I told somebody about Carolyn C. She said, she never met Bill Wilson. No, she didn't. Her stepmother said that she had a passionate relationship for Bill Wilson for a couple of years and came close to marrying him. So anyway, I think you got to be pretty desperate to not believe that Bill Wilson liked women. That's it.
Thank you, Bob Carey, author of Key Players in Their History, if you don't know that. Billy Van. Billy, we are recording, just to let you know. Billy, did you want to come in, sir?
Oh, yeah, okay. I thought I had to unmute. I wasn't going to say anything. I was not going to say anything until just...
So you spoke to your sponsor, and here you go.
Yeah, right. Well, no, that's why I'm calling. That's why I'm talking.
That's right.
I have the benefit of getting sober in the 70s in New York City. All these characters are around. I used to go to a meeting all the time with Barry Leach. I spoke at a meeting with Barry. In fact, went to the convention in 1985 with Barry, his last address. My sponsor, who got sober in the 60s, now I never met his sponsor, was a woman named Beth. She died by the time I got sober. But Jerry talked all the time, my sponsor, how Beth used to sleep with Bill. And I was like, what? No, this is not rumors, folks. This guy was, yes. I can tell you from a personal thing. But if you were in New York in the 70s, we were all young people coming. AA was made like Tinder look like Quaker meeting. I mean, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, don't drink, go to meetings. 13 step was in granite. I mean, come on. We're alcoholics. You know?
We're alcoholics with programs, Billy. But Billy, we're alcoholics with programs now, right?
What's that?
We're alcoholics with programs now, right? So we're trying to live by a moral code, of course.
Oh, yeah. But here's the deal. I think Bill Wilson it says somewhere in the 7th step, many of us come to this very willingly. Others have to be battered and bludgeoned by our character defects. I think that if you stay sober, no matter what, you will get better eventually. Those character defects, that philandering, that whatever it is that you're into, will eventually become as much as I used to go to my sponsor and say, I did it again. And he said, well, you will stop it when it becomes as much a problem to you as your drinking was. And I found that to be true. I mean, now, for the past 25, 30 years, I've lived an exemplar moral life. But when I was